This is the Game Envy wet palette, and I'm going to walk you through how to set up your paper. So I'm just going to take the lid off here, and you'll see I've already flooded the palette with water. And if you look here, it's actually above the sponge. So I've got more than enough water to fully cover the sponge, and the sponge is somewhat floating. I'm going to put in my sheet of paper. What you'll notice is it's going to start to curl. Now, if you have your little copper corner palettes, you can definitely put these on, all 4 of them. These will help hold your paper down while it moistens. If you don't have them, that's all right. I'm going to show you how to do it without that. So I'm just going to open it up again, just continue to let it soak a bit. And as it soaks, it should start to flatten out a little. What will happen here is the paper will start to soak up some of the water. As it soaks up the water, the paper itself will expand. So if you notice, the paper is a little bit smaller than the sponge at first, but it should encompass the entire sponge as it moistens. Now, that Game Envy palettes also come with this little plastic card here. This is really good for smoothing out your paper and making sure it gets in there. So at this point, what we'll do is we'll just start to doing this gently. Just make sure we can get the whole palette, or the whole paper into the palette. All right, we'll let it sit there for a little moment more. All right, so now what the next step that I do here is we want to get rid of some of this water. All right, as we smooth this out, let's dump some of this water out. So I always have my water cup here next to me. I can lift this up and just try not to make too much of a mess. Pour it on out. So I'm going to show you what happens if you pour too much of it out. So if you pour too much water out, you're going to notice, actually this is still okay. So if I pour more out and really empty out the palette, so you'll see now I can smooth it out. The paper's really stuck to the sponge, but the sponge itself doesn't really have any water underneath it. So this isn't bad to start out with, but your paper's probably going to dry out fairly quickly and it'll start to curl on you because there just isn't enough water. So this is why I like to use one of these bottles. I'll just put it in the corner here, run it along the edge, and just put a little bit more water. Same at the bottom. Now, if you don't have one of these, that's fine. You don't necessarily need one of these. Just pour a little bit of water along the edge, or better yet, as you're dumping it out, try not to dump out all the water. What you want to see is, if you can look at the edge here, I'm starting to see a little bit of water show up here, so the water is almost at the same height as the sponge itself. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. There we go. So now we can see a thin layer of water at the top. So it's at the same height as the paper essentially, but this paper itself isn't floating. So the paper is still stuck to the sponge, but we've got enough moisture there. This will keep your paper flat as you're working, so it won't curl up. If you see the paper starting to curl, it's because your sponge doesn't have enough water on it. And if you do have your palette shields, you can put those down. And again, this will just help hold the paper down, but also be antimicrobial to help prevent any mold from growing in your palette. And that's how I set up my wet palette for painting. Another tip, I usually also just pour a little bit of clean water on there and a little bit of a bubble there. That way, as I'm working with my paint, I can dip into some clean water to help thin my paints even further without having to go into the actual dirty water. All right. Thanks for joining us.